He was the sole voice of reason among the largest tom-tomming of the entire mainstream media, touting for BJP for another landslide victory in this past Lok Sabha election. He is a psephologist, even though he doesn't like to be called one. He has been a politician. He is an activist. And if you really want to put it on it, he quit the Aam Aadmi Party, even though he was one of the earliest members of it, or was forced to exit it, if you really want to make put a pin on it and make it more quite direct. I'm talking about Dr. Yogendra Yadav. He is not just a political activist. He is a speaker. He is he is an author. He is also somebody that maybe we should all be looking for, as he is the sole voice of reason in the entire cacophony of noise. Thank you so much, Dr. Yadav, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. I don't think I'm the sole voice of reason. There's just so many voices. The trouble is those voices never make it to television. Those voices, there are millions of voices of reason in this country. They don't get space like I'm getting now. Thanks for giving me the space.
My first question is to you would be that you were one of the very few people who got the numbers right this time around. How do you feel? Do you feel vindicated?
I draw some satisfaction, not because I got the numbers right. That's an accident, and as I've said again and again, there's an element of fluke in it. When you make two errors and they go in opposite direction, they cancel each other out and you come out looking very good. So a bit of that has happened to me. So the satisfaction I draw is not from the fact of this being right. That's okay. That's one of those things. But I draw satisfaction from the fact that when it was needed, when the entire mainstream media had spread this impression that this election was a done deal, that 400 par and things of that sort, and many people who were feeling very uneasy and were beginning to wonder if there was any point in voting at all, at least people like me could stand up and say, no, please vote, there is hope, things are changing, chunav palat gaya hai, Uttar Pradesh mein bhujal aane wala hai. I think said things of that kind when the election was on. So I draw more satisfaction from that role of mine than from the fact of the final figures being better than exit polls.
Sir, in the past few lectures that you have, when you have been keynote speaker, especially, and in this current one as well, you have, to an extent, taken the mainstream media to task. But mainstream media is not just the national television, it's also the regional televisions over there. It's also the Hindi heartland televisions, the Hindi state televisions also. Where do you think there are similarities? Do you think there are similarities, and do you think there are differences? If yes, what are they?
When you speak of mainstream media, one should always mention the honorable exception. And it so happens that most of those honorable exceptions were from outside Delhi. Among print media, I would think of the Hindu, the Deccan Herald to some extent, the Telegraph, these papers, and of course, Indian Express. These papers kept a sense of balance about reporting. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to name too many Hindi newspapers of that kind. I read all of them, and I would not be able to put even one major Hindi newspaper in that category. I would not be able to put even one Hindi television channel in that category. And I'm sorry, I would not be able to put even one English channel, mainstream English channel, in that category. And isn't that a shame? It's not just for me to say. You are a journalist. 20 years down the line, when you look back, would you feel good about this phase of Indian journalism? 10 years ago, 20 years ago, people used to say, I'm a journalist. And today, when they walk on the street, the kinds of things people say, which is very unfair because journalists are not responsible for what the media is doing. It's the media owners who are basically in the grip of the government. So But for media on the whole, it has been a shameful chapter for the Indian media, not merely because of the exit polls and so on. Exit polls are some of the most harmless things. But throughout the campaign, media disinformed this country. They kept this country in the dark. Not just they acted as megaphones of the government, and they went after the opposition like a pack of wolves. I'm sorry for this vocabulary, but there cannot be any other description for what the media did in this country. This is a criminal act against this country. And if the media was even half decent, half truthful, not even full truthful, if the media had entertained the suspicion that maybe this election is closer than it looks, that alone would have caused 1 or 2% further swing away from BJP. And BJP would have been closer to 190 rather than 240.
So you talk about half-truths, but that has been the regimental line throughout. There have been half-truths mixed with lies of omission, and then full lies where people were not able to make the distinction. And considering the BJP has come back to power, what has changed?
We know what has not changed. The regime has not changed. Its lies have not changed. Its campaign of hatred has not changed. But something has changed in the air. The people's mood has changed. And those who want to bring about change in this country, their confidence has changed. And in the last instance, that is what changes countries. So the Hawa has changed. And I think, so I do not pin my hopes on the regime, on BJP RSS tussles, on BJP versus allies games. These are of no consequence in the long run. But I pin my hopes a bit on the opposition. More than that, on protest movements, on people's movements, on popular resistance. That is what keeps democracies alive. And that is where I pin my hope.
So you say about protests on the road. आपने बोला लोक प्रकाश नारायण का आपने बताया कि सड़कें खाली हैं तो सियासत आवारा है. But these exact movements are few and far between, and the people, the students, the coming generation who are supposed to be educated about the way of life forward, who are supposed to be educated about the society, they themselves are being, for the lack of a better word, brainwashed into believing what the regimental line of thought has been. So where are these movements? How will these movements come about? Because the JNU of even 10 years ago, 15 years ago is not the JNU of today. And that has been the center, or that has been the one, temple of first movements, first revolutions.
I'm not speaking only of the JNUs. I'm speaking of Muslim women who come out to protest against CAA. I think it's one of the most glorious chapters in those dark times. I speak of the farmers' movement, who stood for 13 months against this authoritarian government. Something to be proud of. I think of Dalit protests against caste violence in this country. I think of protests against acquisition and capture of land by corporate houses. All these things have been around. Yes, they are few and far between. But mind you, catalysts are always small. They change. There is big power of small numbers. They change the color. That's always been the case. And that, to my mind, is what has really constituted this country. Today we remember Jayaprakash Narayan movement of 74 as a great movement, but in terms of number, it was not big. They changed the character, and that is what would happen.
But sir, what Jayaprakash Narayan did, he is more or less forgotten by the mainstream media, by politicians themselves, unless one of these, special days come in, his birth anniversary, his death anniversary, one or two other media will point him out. And Jayaprakash Narayan is just one of them. There are many others. And Jayaprakash Narayan also is more Hindi heartland and North Indian. And I'm sad to say this also, there is this North-South divide somewhere that has been created among. For every Jayaprakash Narayan, there has been an EMS Namboodiripad. There has been a Dravidian ideological thing that has come up. There has been E.K. Nayanar, there has been
Gopal Gowda, there is Devraj Urs, there is a Kamraj, there is Periyar.
Exactly. All of these people are there, but they are only talked upon in the regions that they have come out of, they have been able to make a change. They are as much of executors of change, or the winds of change, or the catalysts of change, as much as a Jayaprakash Narayan has been. And yet, why is there this discord?
I do not see this as a South-North discord or South-North divide. There is a difference. Okay. Difference is, number one, it's absolutely normal and natural. I mean, I don't think too many people know about Jayaprakash Narayan even in Haryana or Punjab. We as a nation are not very good at iconizing some of our leaders. People like, why don't we know about Karpuri Thakur? Do we know about Karpuri Thakur in Karnataka? I think no one in Rajasthan knows Karpuri Thakur, a great leader like him. Similarly, about Kamraj and so on. And there is also, there is a hard issue. And the issue is this, that for far too long, people from North India, especially those who are Hindi speakers, have had this mentality as if they are the landlords and everyone else is a tenant in this house. Now, I don't think most people subscribe to it, but this is a mentality that has been encouraged and built. That must change. And that's why last year when the Bharat Jodo Yatra began, I spoke about Dakshinayan. And I said, for far too long, we from North India have preached to everyone else in this country about unity, about integrity. This time, let the message flow from South to the North. The message of many of these great people that you spoke about, message of social justice, which comes so powerfully from Kerala, Narayan Guru and the entire traditions, message of a Dravidian movement, of rationalism, of secularism, message of deep humanity that comes from Basava and the entire tradition of Vajanakaras. So it's time that these messages also travel to North. And I do hope it is beginning to happen. In many ways, South India has moved ahead of the North India in terms of development, in terms of some basic civic amenities, in terms of some welfare provisions, in terms of quality of governance. So there is a lot to learn from. If we do not create this culture of learning from each other, that can lead to a South-North divide. But I don't think there is a South-North divide, and I would not think we should accentuate it.
So let's say the North-South divide is a creation. It's an artificial creation for many reasons. You also said recently you said that BJP has vested interest in the South, and because of which it is beneficial for the states in the South, apart from the larger picture of India. And now you have mentioned, not just now, you have brought up the Dakshinayan thing. But in this Dakshinayan, not just message might or might not have gone from the south to the north. But what did come down were the half-truths, lies of omissions, complete lies that were brought down in this whole electoral campaign of one supreme leader. There is no two ways about it that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is popular. He has been that. And yet, now South has still again been sidelined, or so to speak, or we will only come to know of it tomorrow when the budget comes out, or any of the other things. Because if you look at the larger infrastructure, the railways in the South are suffering. The civic, the whole delimitation thing, where there was this the huge hue and cry about South having a stepmother brotherly treatment from the North. Do you think there is an end to it, or do you think it's just a construct?
There are certain things to worry about, certain things to be careful not to construct it that way. As I said, there is a South-North difference. Difference is because of the developmental gap as well. So it's not strictly South-North. It is, if you draw a line from Jaipur to Hyderabad, the country to the right of it and the country to the left of it. So it's the south-west and north and east. That kind of division is probably the more
basically anything south of the Vindhyas.
Developmental difference. Yeah, I was worried about it because of the delimitation thing, and I worried because there is a cultural difference, there is a developmental difference, and top of it, if you have something like delimitation, that can create a divide which does not exist as of now. And that's why I'm saying that I'm actually happy with the rise of the BJP in Tamil Nadu and in Kerala, that BJP has developed vested interest. And vested interest is the surest guarantee of good conduct. So I expect that. I would not straight away say that South India has had a stepmotherly treatment. I think if we think of stepmotherly treatment, we should think of places like Jharkhand, places like Bihar, Assam, places which have had serious, which have suffered, which have taken the burden of poverty in this country. I don't blame poor regions for their poverty. The other thing that has happened is that with the coming of the GST regime, states have lost their financial autonomy, and the central government has acquired fiscal powers of a disproportionate extent, as a result of which everyone feels discriminated, everyone feels sidelined. So it's more a federal issue rather than simply a South India issue.
I will mix up two questions now. We talked about, everybody is a minority, which you had pointed out earlier. Also, the federal discrimination because of everything. And I will actually bring in the point of secularism into it. So it's kind of a little convoluted question, but putting all of these together, today almost everyone is saying secularism dead, or there was never a secularism. There are enough and more, contradictory voices about it. But what exactly is secularism? For us, when we were growing up, secular was one word for us in the part of preamble. What exactly is secularism, which can be included into being anti-discriminatory, and especially in today's fabric of Indian society?
I will not get into philosophic debates. On that, Professor Rajiv Bhargav has a very decent position to say secularism is about principled distance of the state from religion. But that's philosophy. You could say Sarva Dharma Samabhav is the very Indian secularism. But concretely, what does it mean? Number one, state cannot have de jure or de facto a religion of its own. India has no religion. There are religions in India. Indian state cannot have a religion. Number two, that you cannot discriminate on the basis of religion like the CAA does. Number three, everyone has equal right to profess, propagate, practice their own religions. And number four, those who happen to be minorities on religious or linguistic or cultural basis have special protection. These are not new things. All this is guaranteed by the Indian Constitution. Even before the word secularism was inserted in the Constitution, all these provisions have always existed. This for me is the core of secularism. And if any deviation from that takes place, to me, it's a violation not merely of the word secularism, not merely of the Constitution, but of the very idea of India. Because secularism in this sense goes back to the days of Ashoka. And the idea of Maitri, that is at heart of secularism. And I want that Maitri to be protected.
But when you look at the way the regime, the government, the central has worked towards one nation, one election, one language, all throughout our lives we have been given India is a diverse country. There is unity in diversity. And one thing that we are looking forward or looking at or staring at is at some point there is a fear that there will no longer be that diversity. In fact, all the southern states or the states in south of India, let's be clear about that, and all the states that are south of India are actually fearful of this particular Hindi imposition, which of course is a majoritarian language. How is somebody going to, especially in today's world, when we have this one uniting language, English, but it is not our natural language, it is not our native language. How will we find ourselves united?
Two things. Number one, no one can erase diversity of this country. The real question is whether the state accepts it and respects it or not, or tries to institute policies which disregard diversity. So the question is about that. My own understanding is that BJP, from that old formulation of Hindi, Hindu, Hindustan, I think they are moving away from the Hindi part of it. If you look at the new education policy debates, the first thing the government quickly stepped back was the Hindi part, because BJP has realized that in order to become a genuinely all India party, which is desperate to become, they simply cannot do linguistic imposition. My opinion on language and national unity is somewhat different from what you suggested. I think we as a country do not need one single language to unite us. The idea of one language, the idea of a national language, of a linked language, all that is not necessary. We have always been a multilinguistic country. And for me, the real problem is, in fact, imposition of Hindi is a much minor phenomena, occasionally which governments indulge in for show and pop. The real imposition in this country is the imposition of English on every Indian, on a Tamil speaker, on a Kannada speaker, a poor Kannada speaker. English is being imposed on them as much as it's imposed on everyone. So my problem is, so for me the solution is India's multiple languages. And we are a country where everyone speaks more than one languages. And let multiple languages flourish. Let mother tongue be the basis of a child's education. And transiting from mother tongue to a standard language to also learning English is a perfect formula devised some 60 years ago. But India's English-speaking elite would never allow that to happen. So to my mind, the real problem is India's ruling class, which is India's English-speaking class, which has oppressed all the languages. and which is actually at the roots of the oppression that we talk about. And if the question of cultural suppression is involved, that is not merely South India. Please do not forget East and the Northeast. If there is one part, and also Kashmir. So federal question is a very real question, which is not merely about South India. It's a larger question. And yes, we should all fight to retain federalism, the federal spirit of this country. And in some ways, this election has somewhat strengthened federalism in this country. We should be very happy about it.
So you mentioned federalism. I think this, I'll hope this will be my last question. So you mentioned federalism. I will move a little bit towards nationalism. It was a similar question. What exactly is nationalism, especially for today's youth? There is a generation gone by. There is a generation that is on its way to be going by. But there is a generation that will be looking at the Second Republic of India that you have been mentioning in your reasons. First Republic is done. We are in a no man's land. Our generations are probably going to be, just be about to see the beginning of the Second Republic. But the youth of today's India, they are looking at a nation. They are looking at a country. What would be nationalism for them? What could be the nationalism for them?
To discover that, we don't need to wonder, we don't need to invent anything new. There was something called the Indian National Movement. Our freedom struggle created our nationalism. What my nationalism is not is very clear. My nationalism is not about attacking my neighbors. My nationalism is not about asserting my superiority on everyone else. My nationalism is not about desperately discovering enemies outside and inside. My nationalism is not about imposing one language, one culture, one religion on this entire country. My nationalism, just in case it has not occurred to people, is Punjab, Sindh, Gujarat, Maratha, Dravid, Utkal, Banga. That's my nationalism. My nationalism is about respecting diversities of this country. My nationalism is about deep pride in the multiple cultural heritage of this country. My nationalism is about making friends with South Africa, oppressed people of South Africa. My nationalism is about going to Bandung in Asia, connecting to them. My nationalism is about making friends in Latin America. My nationalism is about defending Palestinians when no one in the world defended them. This is my nationalism. That is the nationalism I want to recover. That's the great Indian spirit about which Swami Vivekananda speaks. This is the great Indian spirit. This is the idea of India. My nationalism is about Karuna, Maitri, and Shila. Democracy, diversity, and equality. They are built into the idea of India. That is the nationalism that I want to protect and promote.
One last question, I'm done. Nationalism, when you say, sir, when you look at the nationalism that maybe we all want to promote in the youth, how can they think of the nationalism as you have defined when they are busy trying to just live by in today's world?
This happens to every generation. There's nothing new. Even when there was freedom struggle in this country, people were trying to make their own little careers and compromises and so on. Some people stood up and spoke of Indian nationalism. When all kinds of protests have taken place, there's always a very small proportion who stands up, but then they become the voice of conscience of everyone. Today, as we speak, there is a massive protest going on in Bangladesh. But even that massive protest might finally involve 1% of the population. But they today express the voice of Bangladesh. That's always been the case. So, and I do not think the new generation, the young generation, is devoid of idealist people. I find them idealists. Their language is different than mine. Their medium is different than mine. But idealism has not died. The human DNA has not changed. There are idealist people. There are people, young people who are more creative than we used to be, who are more free than we used to be. And they will shape this country probably better than we could.
Thank you so much, sir. I had many questions for you. I hope to see you soon, maybe in person again. And thank you for giving me your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for speaking to SoSouth.
Thank you.